Hello, my name is Ben and I teach you how to write Unity shaders from scratch. In this new series of videos, what we're going to do is explore post effects. A few of you have asked for that type of system, so we're going to create a post effects controller from scratch, attach it to our camera, and also have a simple post effects shader running. The very first one we're going to do is very simple. All it is a screen tint, because I think it'll help set up the structure so that whenever I do the next post effect, for example, maybe bloom, distortion, ripples effects across the screen, whatever it is, I think it will be built based off of this one. But having a basic screen tint will help you understand how a post effects works. Okay, so if you're new to post effects and it's your first time doing it, I recommend starting with this particular video, because this video we will start by creating the post effects controller from scratch, and the post effects shader starting from scratch. All future post effects will just be built off of this particular one. Now, a quick brief on this setup and how post effects works. Post effects is manipulating the render texture, the source render texture, coming from a game camera or a scene camera. So when this game camera renders out this image, all of these objects, it goes into one texture, called a render texture, and often called the source texture. Same for the scene camera. That is why on this camera, this main camera, what we have is post effects controller, which is this script right here. What we're going to do is we're going to get the source render texture, manipulate it through this shader, and then put it back onto screen. And I've also removed anything to do with fog. But other than that, this is the default unlit shader from Unity. Okay, so the first thing we want to use is something called onRenderImage, and this goes on the camera. You can see it right here in the very first line. Unity calls this camera after it has finished rendering. Allows you to modify the camera's final image. So we can just kind of copy this one line right here. So onRenderImage, as it stated before, source is the image coming from the camera, destination is the destination buffer that we want to write to, right? So in order for us to draw straight from the source to the destination, it's called something called camera blit. So it's graphics.blit, and we pass in, there's a bunch of different things we can pass in, but for now, we're just gonna pass in the source, and we're gonna blit it straight onto the destination. So if we do this, there should be no changes. In fact, you probably won't be able to see much effects until after I go through this quite a bit, but I'm just kind of explaining line by line what's happening. So right now we're just kind of taking whatever the camera source is giving us and putting it back onto the screen. That's all we're doing. All right, so in order for us to manipulate this image, we need a render texture to manipulate. So we need something in between, right? If we go straight from source to destination, we have nothing in between for us to use. All right, so let's create that render texture, the middle point in between. So this is gonna be simply render texture. Let's call it render texture. Now, there are a few ways to do this. We can do, of course, a new render texture, but I often avoid this because this, it makes it easier for us to accidentally create memory issues. So Unity actually has something called renderTexture.getTemporary. And what it does is it creates a temporary memory space for you to use a render texture, and then it destroys it after, right? It manages the memory for you. I highly recommend to do it this way. GetTemporary has a few things we need to pass in. So I believe it's the width first. So you can do source.width. Is it width? Yeah, it's width first, as you can see here. And then it's source.height. Then depth buffer. This is a little bit outside this particular lesson, but depth buffer is if this is a depth texture or you need to create one with depth. For now we don't, so it's gonna be 0. And the type of formatting. So again, this is going to be, for now, we're just going to use whatever the render source has given us. There are different types of render texture formats that are specifically good for mobile devices. Maybe some are a little bit more optimal, and also depends on the type of effect you're doing. But for now, we're just going to copy whatever the source render texture has given us. So source format, right? Now, once we've created this texture at the very end, after we finish the blend, after we've done all of our rendering onto screen, we want to make sure we clear it. So it's release. I think it's release. Render texture.release. Yeah, release temporary, and then we pass in the render texture. Okay, so now that our render texture is being created and the memory is being handled, let's use it. Again, you're not going to see any differences at this point, but we're just kind of doing all the preliminary setup for it. What we want to do is take our source and blit it to render texture, because whenever we do a blit, we can actually pass in a material. As you can see here, a material and a pass number. We don't have that yet, but keep that in mind. We will be adding that. And then we want to take our render texture after we've manipulated it to spit it back onto the destination. That's all that's happening right now. So if we save this off, this is actually doing a post effect already. All we're doing is just taking the source, keeping it in memory, and putting it back onto screen. That's what's happening right now. So how do we actually manipulate this? Well, first we need two things. We need a shader and a material, right? So our shader is already created here, but we need to be able to access it here. So let's simply do a public post shader, post shader, and we'll just leave it like that for us to use later. We also need a material, post effects, and we need our material to use this shader. This kind of goes into how you want to manage all your post effects materials and how you want to manage your post effects system. But I'm just going to do it in a very simple way for us to get things going. But generally, you want rendering profiles. You want different types of systems managing this. You usually do not want to stuff it all into the render image. But I will do it this way so that you guys can see what's happening. So if this is null, right? If we don't have a material, let's make one. So go to new material. And of course, what do we want to pass into this material? We want to pass in this shader, right? So now we're going to create a new material that's using this post shader, and that's it. Oh, of course, that's not it. That's not it. We also need to tell this blit to use this post effect material. Yeah, we see our shader here, and now we need to apply our current shader here. Cool. So it's being applied right now, and nothing is happening again. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually manipulate our post effects shader. Since this shader has been attached already to our main camera, this should actually be running. So if I say multiply this by, say, a red, let's go with for 10001. Oops. All right, we multiplied by a red. We go back to our Unity. We can hit play. The reason why it doesn't work in edit mode, we can fix that in a second here. But we hit play. It became red. So now we're actually doing a post effects on the source texture, right? This red is being multiplied right on this line. It's taking the source. We're multiplying it, that red, and we're creating this render texture, this red one, and we're taking that render texture and we're putting it onto our destination. So that's what's happening right now. That's why it looks red, and this is a red tint post effect. So let's kind of clean this up because we don't want to do it this way. And at the same time, we can also clean up our post effects shader so that we don't always have to do this over and over again. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So let's stop this right now. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want this to work in edit mode, and I want it to work on the scene camera as well. This line right here, execute in edit mode, will force this camera to the camera that has this script to run this in edit mode. Image effect allowed in scene view will also kind of force it onto the scene camera. I'm not really sure how it does that. I think it copies this script onto the scene camera or copies this onto the scene camera. I'm not exactly sure how it does that. So let's save that off. And it does. Cool. So let's kind of clean this up a bit. We don't always have to have everything into this one pass. If you notice here, I have a 0 here. This kind of tells me what pass this is in. This is pass 0, right? So usually how we do post effects is if we want to do different passes, we just do pass 1, 2, 3, and so on. But a lot of post effects, especially a lot of the code, especially for the vertex, is the same. Same for the main text. Oh, by the way, main text is the source texture. But yeah, all of this is, we don't have to keep duplicating it. So in order for us to reuse this code, what we can do is put it outside of the sub shader. Outside of the sub shader, we can have CG include instead of the CG shader program. We can do CG include, and then up here we will put all of this, not that part. We can put the include, we can put the app data, the V2F, this main text, and even our vert shader all up here. I'm gonna save that off to see if it worked. I think it has. Let me change something to see, make sure that the shader still isn't responding. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so it's okay with me moving all of this up to here. So now whenever we do our next post effect, we just have to duplicate this, right? And then manipulate just a small bit of code, and we don't have to recreate that over and over again, right? There are some instances where we will change the vertex vert shader, but most of the time we don't need to. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is manipulate this color. Right now we're just doing the color here. At the same time, we can't really create a property because there's no particular material for this. This really depends on how you guys want to set up controlling settings like color. Generally what you have is a render profile system that kind of, hey, these are this is a profile with all of the render settings applied all at once. But for now, I'm going to just kind of shove it into the post effects controller. Again, if you were in production, this is probably not the most ideal way to do it. But if you wanted to manipulate your screen color, this is a quick way to do it so that you could make sure you set it up properly depending on the project that you're working on. So what you can do is manipulate the post effect material color. All it is post effect material dot set color. Very simple, right? It takes in two values. It takes in either a name or I believe, I'm not really sure what it's called, but an ID, a name ID. In order to do the name ID, you'd have to set the IDs up beforehand. But for us to quickly get this to work, let's do it by name. So I'm going to manipulate the screen tint for a particular name in this material. Right now we don't have that yet, so let's make it. It doesn't actually have to be a property, but it can be instead a color here. So it would be a fixed for. We'll call it screen tint. And then instead of this, we'll multiply it by screen tint. Yeah, I think that's good. Let's go here and then we'll put in screen tint. I wonder if I can default this to white. Let's just leave it. We probably want to default it. It's probably going to turn black. Give it a second. Yeah, it's going to turn black. The reason why is because I know this is defaulted black. Not only is it defaulted black, but the alpha is also black. But yes, now you can kind of, based on this screen tint, you can manipulate this color. Again, we're setting it every single frame. This is, again, not the most ideal way to do it. You typically have another system that kind of manages it. But yeah, I think for this particular video, this was the way I would do it, just to kind of show you guys how to set up a very basic post effects system so you can start to create other effects. Right now, this post effects is just a screen tint. So yeah, that is it for this particular video. If you guys like what you see, please like, subscribe, and support my channel. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Bye now.